The first meeting is today, January 23rd at 6 p.m. The second will be on January 28th at 6 p.m. And the third will be on February 3rd at 4 p.m. What is HB 581? HB 581 is a floating homestead exemption that limits the annual increase in property tax assessments to the federal inflationary rate from the prior year. The state will set that amount homesteaded properties can increase at a yet-to-be-determined inflationary rate. Subtenants of the law, school districts have one opportunity to opt out of the legislation. If they do not opt out, the cap will begin in 2025 based on 2024 values. If they do opt out, they must follow an intent to opt out process. Projected impact. OCS projected local revenue collected would have decreased by $13.9 million over the last 7 years if this law had gone into effect already. As you can see in this chart, we assume the CPI, and if we use that for the inflationary rate, the last 3-year average is $2.7 million, or $8.1 million decrease in funding. The changes in HB 581 could significantly impact property tax revenues for OCS. The change could impact flexibility to meet local needs and maintain competitive benefits and salary. As a reminder, we're funded 40% local funds and 54% state funds. And property taxes fund part of our district's salary as well as transportation, school supplies, and curriculum. HB 581 will limit the taxable values for homestead properties, thereby reducing the amount OCS receives as shown in the previous chart. With the inflationary rate capped by HB 581, OCS may have to increase the millage rate to maintain the level of service we offer to Oconee County students. The millage rate is the primary means available to school districts to raise funds, to ensure they can maintain educational services and resources for our students. School systems are limited in the number of mills they can levy. For 2025, the OCS millage rate is 14.25 mills. The maximum millage rate for school districts is 20 mills. For the last 10 years, OCS has lowered or maintained the millage rate. This chart shows the history of the millage rate. OCS has gone from a 17.5 mills in 2014 to the current 14.25 mills, a decrease of 3.25 mills. At the same time, we've grown by 2 schools and over 1,450 students. For example, a current mill is equal to approximately $3.5 million, or roughly about 34 teachers. This chart shows we obviously have not raised the millage rate. Why opt out? OCS has only one chance to opt out, and the process must be completed by March 1st, 2025. Therefore, there is not another chance, even if the legislation causes significant issues to OCS's funding and cash flow. This is a one-time decision with long-term financial impact. There is no sunset to this legislation, and OCS's funding gap could continue to grow. It's important to note this decision to opt out will not affect any existing homestead exemptions. School districts are not authorized to assess an additional penny sales tax like cities and counties. Financial obligations are continuing to increase annually. We have just read with the budget that came out that healthcare premiums, for an example, for classified staff will increase $125 a month, or around $600,000 annually for Oconee County. Opting out allows the board to maintain local control over property tax policies and would have the ability to tailor tax rates to our specific community needs and financial conditions to meet the needs of Oconee County students. The HB 581 presentation FAQ document are posted in Assembly with the corresponding meeting dates mentioned earlier. The hearing dates and times have been posted on the school district website, social media accounts, and in general circulation newspapers, and all advertisements will be published as required. That concludes my explanation of the hearing.
I've got two quick questions. If you're still able to jump back, I just wanted to make sure I understood something on slide 10. So should the board make the decision to opt out, which has not been made yet, it would not impact any existing exemptions, and I couldn't claim to list every exemption out there, but some that come to mind would be homestead exemptions and things like that.
That's correct.
Okay. Could you also jump back over to, I think it was slide 5. And at the bottom it says, House Bill 581 will limit the taxable values for homesteaded properties. Can you tell me if I'm thinking correct here? So whenever we look at our millage rate, the first 5 mills goes to the state per the QBE formula. So our local taxpayers do not retain those locally. So then the next 9.25 mills does stay with our school system to help fund our school system. So when we're talking about limiting the taxable values, it's limiting the taxable values on the 9.25 mills, but not on the first 5 mills.
That's correct.
Okay, so this doesn't overlay on what the state takes per the QBE formula, only on what our local taxpayers retain.
Yes, they've deemed it as a local exemption, therefore
Okay.
they didn't include it in the QBE.
Okay. All right, so over time, those first 5 mills could theoretically be more valuable to the state than the next 5 mills to the local taxpayers.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you for indulging me there for a minute.
No problem, sir.
This is, it is important. Just want to make sure I'm understanding so far. Thank you.
That's correct, sir. Thank you.
Peter, last time we met, one of my questions was how they're going to figure out what this rate is, and at that time they had not settled on a number or a method. Have they changed that yet, or they still don't know?
No, sir. It's still yet to be determined rate.
You think that'll, before we have to submit something to the state, do you anticipate them telling us what rate they'll use to calculate inflation, or what number?
It's possible, but we haven't heard any indication that they're going to.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Thank you.
Public communications, Mr. Colquitt, do we have anybody signed up to speak?
Mr. Ransom, we have 4 citizens signed up this evening. Before I invite them up, I will read this. Policies BCBI and BCBIR1 state that only Oconee County residents or school system employees may address the board, and that members of the public shall conduct themselves in a respectful manner that is not disruptive to the conduct of the board's business. The board allows 3 minutes for those who sign up prior to the meeting. Please state your name, address, and topic. The board requests that you refrain from making any disparaging remarks about school system personnel. Generally, there will be no response to comments or questions posed by citizens at the meeting. All comments and questions will be taken under advisement by the board. However, any board member shall be free to respond and make public comments if he or she elects to do so. To any citizen wishing to provide documents for board members, please submit them to the Director of Communications before the meeting or prior to addressing the board. Please remain at the podium during your public comment time. Our first citizen is Roy Bairn.
Welcome.
Yes, my name is Roy Byrne. I live at 2744 Wild Indigo Crossing, Statham. And my wife and I came here tonight really to try to understand this opt-out thing better. So I really don't have a lot to say except one thing right now. Now, we're planning on coming to every meeting, so I might have more to say later. But I don't understand how you can even consider opting out when the voters voted 64% for this bill. So that's my question, and I'll have probably further questions later. Thank you.
The next citizen is Ian Taylor.
Mr. Taylor, welcome.
Good evening, y'all. As the previous speaker said, HB 581 was passed overwhelmingly by the Georgia House, and the Senate voted on as a constitutional amendment by nearly two-thirds of Oconee County voters. For years, many of us have asked, begged, pleaded, even demanded that our taxes not be excessively raised, and we were steadfastly ignored. So when local taxing authorities continually ignore the citizens, it is the duty of the state to intervene, which I believe they have just done. Mr. Hammond, you said at the last board meeting that you believe the time to discuss this legislation is before citizens are asked to vote on it, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Neither this board nor the administration discussed this legislation prior to the election, despite requests to do so. Turning briefly to the analysis that was provided on the financial impact of this legislation, with all due respect to the folks involved in creating the analysis, it is superficial and oversimplistic. Showing a decrease in revenue because the property valuation decreases while assuming the millage rate would remain static is unreasonable. You all adjust the millage rate every single year. So if you take your analysis for the last 5 years of that 5-year analysis provided, on average, a 1 mil increase in the millage rate would restore the revenue to pre-exemption levels, and that doesn't get you anywhere close to your 20 mil maximum. I also find it somewhat odd that whenever cuts to funding are discussed, it's always to the emotional cry of teachers and students will suffer. No mention is ever made of administration costs that could or should be decreased. And I've got to admit, every time I walk into this $18 million building, I'm reminded there is absolutely no shortage of funding to the Oconee County schools. And Mr. Hammond, you also talked last time about transparency, and I would like to remind you that transparency is not just sitting there looking at us talk at you for 3 minutes, but it also means talking about this whole thing in an open meeting. And I would like you to hear you challenge and receive real answers from the administration, and we saw a little bit of that earlier, and I appreciate that we'll actually ask you some questions. To say that the citizens of Oconee County, or to say to the citizens of Oconee County that you cannot commit to only raise taxes at the rate of inflation, when most of those taxpayers will, at best, only see CPI-size increases in their incomes, is egregious. I don't believe you need to opt out, and I need you to please take into account what the voters actually voted for. Nearly two-thirds of the voters said, put a freeze on it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
The next citizen is Bill Fox.
Mr. Fox, welcome.
Now, I want to thank y'all. My kids got a great education here. Y'all done a fine job. Some of y'all weren't here, some of y'all were. I'm 66 years old. My neighbor is 94 years old. 2/3 of our tax dollars are based, of my property tax goes to the school system. This year it went up $400. Now, I've paid property tax in this county for a long, long time. If y'all don't do anything but give seniors, and I don't care if it's 25% less, 10% less, if you get to be 94 years old like my neighbor, it ought to be zero. I mean, it's ridiculous to keep paying property tax till you die, especially if you don't have anybody in the school system. I agree with these other gentlemen. The voters voted for this. Now, I've frozen my property tax. I went down when I turned 65, and I got my value frozen. So you can adjust your income, whether it's frozen or not, through the millage rate, up to 20%. Now, the one metric I didn't see up there, I saw where you showed the graph where y'all have lowered the millage rates. You need another graph to show where the property values have gradually increased at a pretty high rate during that same period, allowing y'all to lower the millage rates to meet your budget requirements. I got a 30-year-old son with a good job at university. He can't afford a house in Oconee County. It's just that way. And if you're on a fixed income and an older adult that wasn't in the social economic society that we have now, they don't have the money and all. It's impacting them. I volunteered a lot of places, ARC out here and my Lions Club, and the seniors are debating between food, taxes, living indoors, medicine. I mean, it's you've been to the grocery store. So we need some relief, people. We don't need continued, and I don't think the prices of property are going down in Oconee County. My first house was $53,000 right over here off of Height Drive. The last time it sold was $280 something. It ain't but 1,380 square feet. So, you know, when you look at the value, and then, you know, I don't know where opting out is good or bad, but the voters voted for it, and if it can lower the taxes on the burden of the taxes on the people in Oconee County, it would be worth sticking with the plan. If nothing else, come up with another plan, like help us seniors. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Our next citizen is Esther Porter.
Ms. Porter, welcome.
Good evening. I'm Esther Porter. I live at 1111 Summit Circle in Watkinsville. My concerns, of course, is this Bill 581, and I've read your reasons for wanting to opt out. But one of the things we didn't realize as voters, that you had that option. You know, when we read the bill, we thought this was going to be an exemption for us. And as they said, 3/4 of the citizens have voted to have this 581. But the points that I'd like to make is this bill only affects homeowners. It does not include agriculture, commercials, industrial properties, residential properties that's not occupied by the homeowners, such as apartments. It was reported in the paper that you received over $1 million of income over your proposed budget last year. It appears that you have substantial income other than taxes from the homeowners. I know it's your duty to take care of our school system, and we do have one of the finest school systems in the nation, and we recognize that. At one time, we didn't have industry in this county, and I can remember taxpayers really were supporting everything. But today we do. As you saw in that graph, your percentage mill went down. Well, I think one of the reasons it went down is our properties went up and we got a lot of businesses in here. So you receive a lot of money through that way. But also the incomes that you have from state, federal, and the interest of your investments. And I think this board should put into consideration the citizens that have voted that they would like this House Bill 581. And I am asking that you please not opt out. I do appreciate the time that you've allowed me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Mr. Ransom, that concludes public communication.
Thank you, Mr. Colquitt. We have no further business. Hearing is adjourned.